Austin. I volunteer with the Advocacy Network to End Family Homelessness. And we're here today to talk about family homelessness, and most especially to hear from three ladies who have experienced this in their personal lives. In a couple of cases, very locally here, and invisibly to most of us, but underscoring the importance and the urgency of this position. The network was started in 2004, and in fact right here, with a lot of help from Tricon as well as other churches in the Concord area, which are listed on our board as sponsoring churches. And we have since then continued to work. Unfortunately, we haven't ended family homelessness, as our name has implied, but we're certainly advocating towards that end. Our purpose is to educate and encourage advocacy, most especially at the state level, state legislature, to not only eliminate the root causes of family homelessness, but to alleviate and help the circumstances and consequences of that, which you're going to get today are pretty serious and invisible to most of us day to day, but they're nonetheless for a pretty large group of people. I'd like to pass the mic to my friend Barbara on the end. She's got a live mic there. She's our hostess here at Tricon, and she'll introduce our minister to open our event. Barbara.
Thanks, Frank. First, I'd just like to let people know that the restrooms are available. The first door on the left as you exit this room is one, and there are more available downstairs if you take either the stairs to the left of the entrance or the elevator to the right of the entrance. Lecturing at Red Loaf Writers Conference on the Book of David, the novelist and Holocaust survivor Laurie Siegel said this: "Story has the power to manipulate imagination, and this story, the Book of David, makes the king imagine two different things. The affection felt by someone who is not himself in an unlike situation and tradition, and to feel somebody else's feelings as if they were his own. Imagine what we might do or not do," Siegel challenged, "if we imagined the enemy. And now, imagine if our enemy imagined us. It is against our nature, but what if we learned to hear each other's voice? There are as many worlds as are our pairs of eyes. Imagine that if only for a moment we could see through another person's eyes, what a different world we would have." Today we're going to have the opportunity to do just that. We have, as three courageous women share their stories into the dark journey of being homeless, how it affected their families, and how they survived. As we listen to their voices, may we be empowered to act, to speak up, to advocate, to end family homelessness in our state. Now I'd like to ask our senior minister, Reverend Bob Brown, to give you a proper welcome and give us a blessing as we begin.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tricon Church, a Trinitarian Congregational Church. We've done a lot of seeking into what we believe God's vision for this community of faith is. And we found the words to put to this vision, and that God is asking us to become a nurturing community of faith that honors God through service and mission. And today, having you here to discuss the issue of homelessness, not as a Band-Aid issue, but as a systemic issue, is exactly what we mean when we say serving God through service and mission. We appreciate so much the opportunity to host and to use our building for such action. I also want to introduce my colleague Jean Vandergrift, who is also here. If you have any questions about the community of faith or about our church, or need to know where the bathrooms are, you can ask us as well. I agree that story has power. You can't debate someone's story. You can't challenge the story. You listen to it and let it seep into you, and you then become part of that story. It's a really, really powerful tool, and I'm so glad that you're here to tell your stories today to us. Let's begin, if we could, with a blessing to whatever you might call holy. God, our hearts break that we even have to talk about homelessness and poverty. And we ask that you would help us to ignite our imaginations, give us the energy, the strength, the creativity to come against this horror. We ask that we would be agents that would restore the dignity that has been lost, and be agents of substantial and real change in a culture that lives for justice and mercy, forgiveness, and dignity. Be with us as we hear these stories and open our hearts to hear your word through them. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. It's no secret that housing is expensive in Massachusetts. And it's no secret, too, that wages aren't as great as they should be. There's a clear market uncoupling between the haves and the have-nots. And there's a lot of politics in all of that, but there's a lot of reality as well. One of the things that we have discovered over the past 15 years is that folks have their own perceptions of this problem and who is affected by it. And it's important to know, and what we have found is that homeless families are very different than what a lot of us think of as homeless people. When you look at this population, it's 60% single moms with families. The statistics on drug abuse are the same as the general population, as is any problems with law. Most of these folks don't want to be homeless. Most of these folks work very hard to get out of it and to solve their problems. But frankly, we're all human beings. We all bring different tools, and some of us can do it, and some of us can't. There's some major structural things about the housing market that we have to address. And legislation is a good place to start. So, I mean, we look at that and we say, well, what are the numbers? Well, if you look at the statistics statewide, we're told that close to 14,000 individuals are in homeless families in Massachusetts alone. And this has gone up by about 18% in the past 8 years. Now that's a good bit after the recession and all, and there's a number of ways we can look at that. But you'll agree with me that these are incredible numbers. I mentioned 60%. 60% is the number of children that are in these families. So if you just do the math on that, you come up with 8,000, 9,000 children in Massachusetts who are homeless. And to that point, the Massachusetts Department of Education agrees. And in fact, they indicate, I guess this was a year or so ago, that there's over 9,000 children in our school system who are homeless. And various levels. You have some in shelters, some doubled up on their relatives' couch with their families and all. And at this point, I'm just going to take a quick break and recognize our Senator Jamie Eldridge, who just walked into the room, our Senator from Middlesex and Worcester. Would you please stand so everyone knows?
I didn't know if anyone saw me come in late. Yeah.
That's okay. We forgive you. So the numbers are real, and I'm not going to burden you with a lot of that because we have a lot more to hear. What we've asked all of our speakers is 10 minutes is kind of the bar we're looking at here. We want to move this along. We want to get you all out and about on a beautiful day. But this is an important message. The Advocacy Network, the flip side of our business is then to help you to advocate. First of all, we're totally free. There's a volunteer thing. Everything we do with our events, and we hold workshops with a professional social worker advocate. Everything is free for those people who want to play. If you enroll in our online network, which is over 700 people, we send you alerts to the extent that you want to receive them. You don't want our email? Tell us, we'll take you off. We don't sell your information or your name, whatever. We are in this for this issue and for advocacy. So if you want to be part of our network, please sign the sheet that you saw at the door or in the back or whatever, and possibly come later on and put your name down. So that is how we work. We have something to talk about today, and that is the testimony of our speakers here today as they've gone through homelessness. And on that note, when timekeeper has said I'm at 0 and have been for a while, I'm going to move right along. Would you be up first?
Sure.
Okay. I would like to have Louisa come forward and introduce our first speaker. Louisa Wilkins is a member of our steering committee, and she has brought a friend with her we're anxious to hear from.
It is with great pleasure that I introduce my colleague, Maggie Lindemann. We have worked together at early intervention in Concord for 6 years. And is it not loud enough? Sorry. Maggie Lindemann is my colleague at Concord Early Intervention in Concord, and she has worked there for 6 years. After I'd known her for a while, she told me that she had experienced homelessness as a child and some of the problems that she ran into. And she's going to be telling you all about that when she talks. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm thankful to be here today and thankful to the Homeless Steering Committee for the opportunity to share my story. We know I've never done this before, so be gracious with me and I'll be gracious with you. We know how many families and children experience homelessness across our country, right? Statistics continue to grow as cost of living skyrockets disproportionately to income. This is something I saw firsthand in tent communities in South Carolina through my work at AmeriCorps. But I'm here today to represent families that never make it to a spreadsheet. They live in hiding all over our nation and state. They live here in Concord too. They come from affluent families like ours. My family was homeless from 1999 to 2001. My mother, brother, and I were kicked out of our apartment and spent the first few nights in a rented Corsica. It was late winter and cold. Our dog and belongings went to shelters, but we did not. Little did I know that this would be the last time that I would see those things again. You see, my mother came from a wealthy family where struggles were dealt with silently. Our community was Maynard, where issues like this similarly were not spoken of outwardly. My father was working and living in Ohio and sent us money to stay in a hotel for some time. After that, whispers between classmates' parents became couch surfing opportunities that lasted for several years. We spent 2 Christmases in hotels. I was just turning 13 when this happened. I had just reached puberty. It was a hard time. In truth, much of our life had been filled with homeless insecurity, so these sort of experiences weren't exactly new. It wasn't jarring in that way. I had learned to wear it like an armor. In true teenage fashion, I took this giant chip as the reasoning behind this anger and insecurity for the world that was really new and uninhibited for me. I glorified and leaned into hip-hop music and culture and took on a role of troubled kid with street cred. I had experienced some gang culture in Ohio as well, so I had never lived anywhere longer than 2 years. So I was no stranger to cold beds, cold showers. I had already been working for 2 years at this time, which was not an option and kept my stomach full most of the time. However, I did not see a paycheck until I was 18. I turned 18 and realized my name was made up, my inheritance was gone, and my name was in collections. I trusted no one. I had no respect for authority figures. And I had a burning sense to numb myself and just get away. So I began drinking heavily and using drugs by the summer of my 14th birthday. Around this time, I lost my virginity to date rape. And I leaned into this role and just let boys and men use me for a brief feeling of belongingness and confidence. My mother suffers from mental illness, and due to her intelligence, was able to deceive many people. My brother and I were cooking, dodging bill collectors, and walking ourselves home from school by the 2nd grade. We told ourselves it made us special, stronger, and used our imaginations to a Z. We pretended it was fun when we'd have to push our broken car to the nearest gas station and convince the owner to give us free gas. But deep down, I was a sensitive girl, and my family preyed on us at times. We were all hurting. My mother would have us carry out lavish lies for her, pretending we were injured or worse. She sexualized me, and in this way, I was very versed in uncomfortable situations with older men at a young age. Throughout this time, we saw doctors, family, and friends. No one spoke of mental illness. No one offered to help out of fear of being duped by my mother. So we turned to strangers. The favor of these strangers would not last for long. When I was in 4th grade, my mother did nearly pass away from cancer. She continued to milk this diagnosis throughout the years to gain attention and money. She would often pretend to seizure when a particularly bad fight would break out. My brother would physically abuse me, and my mother would verbally abuse me, often not stopping until she could hear me cry. I learned to cry silently. Now I just cry all the time. I thought of death constantly at this time. I spoke to no one, and no one spoke to me. When you go to high school as a homeless person, you want to disappear. In a small town like Maynard, this is nearly impossible. The families that were helping us grew sick of us. Rumors formed. The town began calling my mom Crazy Ann. My reputation could not have been worse. Teachers would kick me out daily, tell me they knew who I was, belittle me in front of peers. I fought back. It grew worse. And I can tell you 100% of the time, tough love does not work for traumatized kids. I wasn't sleeping. I was burning at both ends. I was searching desperately for attachments everywhere that I could. You see, children need communities as much as they need homes. There are a few basic things that brought me where I am today. Places like the Boys and Girls Club that brought me a sense of home, no matter where I was. Programs like the Young at Arts in Boston, which was a free, art program that fostered my creativity and taught me that I could be special. Experiences like AmeriCorps that brought me out of my bubble, gave me a sense of pride and purpose, and trained me in new skills. And a few great friends and their family members that accepted me, fed me, let me shower without calling me names, scrub. At my time with my family that took me on vacations and high society events. A few teachers that stood up for me, gave me that letter jacket, let me sleep in their class, showed me respect. The extracurriculars were also very important in my life. I dove into them, drama and dance. We had a lot in Maynard. And my brother grew to look after me and sacrifice his little earnings to make sure that I'd have lunch money and taught me to be brave. But what helped me most were things that I could not have helped. My resiliency and my intelligence. That I was born with. It has taken me and continues to take a lot for me to get rid of these embedded senses of shame for the things I've done and that were done to me. I have had to completely relearn how to live without a sense of survival. My husband does remind me that I can trust you people. I can hold on to materials. And through this, I've regained a sense of trust. I've finally gotten that feeling that I dreamt of what home would feel like, that when you were sick and you walk in a doorway and you just somehow feel better. I am at peace. But now my heart reaches for those less fortunate, who don't have the resiliency and don't have the fortitude to survive such traumas, who cry their full, hungry beds to sleep. Just no one will ever know just how hurt they are. These brave souls need a voice. As you can see, there are so many more factors to homelessness than the ones we acknowledge. So many more than I've even mentioned today. And so I thank you all for finding a passion in this subject. I hope that you will continue to advocate and act on behalf of these silent victims tomorrow and onward. We know things that can be done. We know progress that is attainable. And so I urge you not to think of the statistics, but sometimes just to wake up and go out to your very town and help someone that doesn't ask for it. It need only be a ripple. Ripples become waves. I'm ready to be that wave. And so I thank you for letting me share my story today. I hope that it inspires you to try. Thank you.
And it goes to the issue with youth, and I'll comment on that in a little while. So many of the things that you said speak to us about the very quiet, invisible damage that's being done to our children through this. And it really has to come out, and we have to look at it. I would like to take a moment and recognize someone who just entered the room. Our representative from Middlesex, our new representative, congratulations, to Representative Tammy Gouveia, who is here with us. Please stand and be recognized. So we go on. Again, thank you so much. Christine Chase has joined us. And I'd like to hear, we have heard, we've met before. Yes, in fact, in this very place, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, good. Thank you for coming. Would you be so kind as to introduce?
Certainly, I'd be glad.
Yes, please.
I want to introduce Christine Chase, who is a City Mission, part of the City Mission family. Christine came to us to a program that we call a Lift Up, which is a homelessness prevention program, about 8 years ago. And now she serves as our database coordinator at City Mission. We hired her, and we love her. But also, more than that is that she has a story to share with you this afternoon about her challenges and successes, and we just love this person. She does great work, and so thank you for being here. She just came from a speaking engagement in Norwell.
I want to thank you for inviting me here, and I want to start by saying City Mission and a Lift Up completely really saved my family at a point in our lives when we were desperate and had no idea where we were going to end up or what was going to happen to us. I found out about City Mission when when I ended up in Boston Housing Court because I was in the process of being evicted. I had I was found myself all of a sudden, after 20 years of marriage, being left with 4 children on my own due to substance abuse, and had no idea what to do, where to go. I grew up in a middle-class family. My father was a Boston firefighter. My mother was a director of nurses at a hospital, and so I had no idea about the welfare system, how it worked. Housing court, I had never even heard of, and so this was a whole new devastating experience. And when I first walked through the door of the courthouse, I was terrified. I can't even tell you what my insides were like. And I literally shook at the thought of having to go and face a judge, because I had never been in trouble with the police or in a courthouse ever. And I was approached by an attorney who told me that I had to sign these papers, and because if I didn't, my family and I would have no place to live, and I had no idea what was going on. So I just agreed to whatever they told me. I signed the paper figuring it would give me at least 30 days, knowing that I had no means to be able to pay the back rent or even future rent. And so I signed the papers and walked out the door, literally distraught at how am I gonna figure this out. And there was, somebody had directed me to an office in the courthouse and told me to go over up to them because they might be able to help me. And in that office, that's where they said they knew of this program that City Mission ran. It was called a Lift Up, but I would have to commit to 2 years. They would make the referral for me, and I said, okay. I hesitantly made the phone calls and did what I needed to do, trusting nobody at this point, because we have a real traumatic backstory with Department of Social Services and all that. And so I met with the case manager I had, was assigned, and just gave basic information. Like, this is where I'm at, this is what's going on, I don't know what's gonna happen. And I stuck with it. I was really at the lowest point I've ever been. I had no job. I have 4 children with mental health issues. One of them really having a really hard time. And so I started the program, and one of the financial support is really important, and it's a great help. However, that's not the meat of the program for me, and a lot of the moms who have graduated will tell you this, that the real pull for us is that it's a camaraderie. It's a place where it's safe. You can be who you are and not feel judged. You can tell your story and tell your struggles, and have them get it. And not only that, but you're in a room full of people who are in the same position you're in, but they know of resources that you have no idea about, and I had no idea about any of them, so for me it was really a connecting piece. And the other thing they provided was for my children, so that I could go to these monthly meetings, there was childcare provided, which for me was really important because I was by myself and had nowhere to leave my kids. And I didn't trust anybody with them. And so that was really important. And the other thing is the educational piece behind that, budgeting. How do you manage the budget on a low income and quote unquote save? I don't even, like I can't even meet my bills and you're telling me I need to save money. How is that gonna happen? And the one piece I took away from that class that I've never forgotten is that it doesn't matter about the bills and all that at first. Set a goal, set a certain amount of money that you're gonna put aside and do that every month. And that comes out first before you pay your bills. And that has really been a real lesson for me, because otherwise I was nothing. I lived day to day and that's it. And so now I have managed to, thanks to the support of the City Mission staff, I went to graduate school. I got my master's in social work. I got my social work license, and I'm slowly coming out the other end. I currently, not only do I work for City Mission, but they run their Lift Up group every month. My 23-year-old daughter and I do the child care so that they don't have to try to finagle who's gonna watch the kids. And moms don't have to worry, because I not only now have my master's in social work, but I have a bachelor's degree in early childhood special ed, which really works for these kids who are traumatized. Because there are some people that just don't get it and think they act out because they're acting out and they're not. And so it's my turn to give back. My going forward, my hope is that, as I tell June on a regular basis, that I'm gonna get arrested someday because all these buildings, the vacant buildings that are going up in the city of Boston, they talk about how they're making room for homeless people, and in fact they're not. I want to go around pasting billboards that say, how many of these are for low income? We hear about affordable housing. Well, right now I currently live in Cambridge, and I found out probably a couple of months ago, which kind of astonished me, and I can't even register it in my head, is that someone in Cambridge who makes $100,000 or less qualifies for affordable housing. I can't even compete with that. And so when I talk to people and they tell me affordable housing, I'm like, I don't want to hear affordable housing. I want you to talk low income housing. Because affordable housing, I'm never going to be able to afford. My kids can't afford. And I currently have a woman who has 6 children. 4 of them live with her, who is homeless, but lives with me. I take care of her kids. I help her take care of her kids. And she too is never going to be able to afford that affordable housing. And so for me, the push is really, want to educate people that it's not only individuals who are homeless. You have loads and loads of families out there. There are roughly, 4,000 children in the Boston Public Schools? More than that.
4,000.
Yeah, over 4,000 children in the Boston Public Schools who are homeless. And I don't know, I used to worry about my kids sitting in the classroom and how are they gonna, well, the kid next to your child may be homeless, and nobody will ever know that because they're not gonna tell them. And how do we treat them the same way as the kid who's not homeless? They need the same things. They need the same love, the same stability, the same encouragement. Their families don't need anything less, and they're not less than just because of circumstances that they're out of their control. Clearly it was out of my control. I didn't have control over what happened. But I did my best to kind of push through it. And City Mission has really saved my family. It has paid forward not only for me, but my kids. My kids are forever indebted and talk about City Mission all the time, and how they can bring that forward. And so just continue to help, try to educate yourselves and others as to, clearly there's a difference between affordable housing and low-income housing, and that's a huge thing. And that it's not only individuals who are homeless, but there are a huge number of families who are being displaced and sent far, far beyond where they're used to being able to live if they can't live. And I just want to thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Christine. That was very helpful. Before I open this up for any questions you may have for either of our speakers just now, let me just comment on this affordable housing versus low-income housing. In case you haven't done the math, okay, affordable housing is based on area mean income. And that, no surprise, in areas in Boston and the suburbs, is a respectable income. It's well over $100,000 a year. And so when you take 80% of that, which is what the law says, that's affordable, you come down to 60, 70,000, whatever it may be. So there you go. That's affordable. Now, everyone who makes less than $70,000 a year qualifies for affordable housing. Okay, well, we all run there, including those folks who make our current minimum wage, which is $11 an hour. And on a 40-hour week, that's 23, 25, I don't know, $1,000 a year. That's the best we can do. To the question of advocacy, our state legislature did get with us and get a bond issue on it, legislation, whatever, and raise the minimum wage back in 2012. It had been $8.50 an hour or something like that. Now, too, there's some people that were forgetting about it. I don't need to go on about this a lot. But tip workers, by the way, federal minimum for tip workers is like $3 an hour. And I don't know what it is in the state either. But we count on the fact that these mostly ladies are going to get rich on all the tips we're giving. And so, in fact, we withhold 20% of their salary for the possibility they're going to have tips. So we want to tax. So there's a lot of people who within that affordable housing game don't even come up on the radar screen. Now, why is that? Well, you put their application at $25,000 a year next to the top of that, maybe $70,000 a year. Who do you think is going to be accepted to rent that particular property? Well, the person who can best afford it, obviously. So, there we
Excuse
go.
me, Frank, can I make a quick comment? I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
The one thing I would just want to level of detail is that part of it is that when affordable housing is approved in the suburbs, it's generally, you're talking about chapter 40B usually.
Yes.
It's just approved at 80% of the median income.
Yes.
Which tends to be, almost basically middle class people.
Right.
And so a town or city, or obviously the state, if we provided a deeper subsidy, we could build housing that's 50% of the median income, or 30%. It's just that, quite honestly, in the suburban communities, more often than not, select boards, et cetera, just say, we're gonna build it at 80%. So this is where, if towns or cities could provide a deeper subsidy, and obviously the state has to step up too.
Right.
You could build more housing that's for truly low-income people.
Yes.
So
Very
there's
good.
different levels of affordable, but there needs to be more done to serve,
Well-
to your point, about low-income housing.
If we get legislation like that, we're behind it. I would say that, because our message, particularly after the Senate issued its housing report a few years back, it was pretty clear that this problem existed. Supply and demand had run away with the market, and the $1,500, $2,000 a month rents were pretty standard for most places. So it, we'd love to hear more about that, and we'd be happy to get behind it. Anyway.
Can I just say something?
Yes,
Just
please.
because
Christine.
I don't know if you realize that in order for a person to be able to afford even a one-bedroom in the city of Boston or even the surrounding area, they have to make at least $27 an hour.
Yeah.
I don't even make that.
So, I mean.
We're working
yeah.
on it. We're working.
Yeah.
Justice
And
employer.
when you have a family with,
That's right.
God willing,
That's right.
2 parents, and they both get minimum wage jobs, well, they can boost themselves up, but maybe that's $50,000 a year household income, and even that is high. The figures statewide on people who are paying more than 50% of their household income for rent is huge, and it's tens of thousands. I forget what the statistic is for these guys. So the state senate said we need to look at low income, and we need to have more multi-family properties. And it was said that like 2/3 of the towns in our state hadn't proposed a multifamily, 5-unit or more, multifamily rental property in 5 years. And why is that? Well, because if you're a developer, it's all about money, and you're going to build the stuff that's going to get you what you want. So, whatever it may be, it doesn't help. And here we're kind of getting away from taking care of each other. But that's that's the comment. We are very strongly for low-income housing, multi-family housing, and trying to make that happen. And we are very strongly behind state legislation and programs that go in that direction. Absolutely. Now, I wasn't supposed to have 10 minutes. I've been at zero for a while. Anyway, we have one more delightful speaker who I drove in from Marlboro today. Lynette Martin is a jewel. This lady is bright. She speaks from her heart, and most importantly, she has been through one heck of a path with her family. Starting with, and we'll talk a little bit about this issue too, being required by the state of Massachusetts to sleep in her car with the family in March so she could prove that she was truly in need of shelter. She was eligible in all of the ways, but she had to stay there. And unfortunately, the state's argument is this costs too much money. So every year since 2012, they've what, 600, 700 families a year are required, even though they meet all other standards, they're required to prove that they and their family have stayed in an unsafe place. We use the term unsafe. But, you know, the truth is that there have been families sleeping in South Station who have been subject to abuse and crime because they are pretty conspicuous. Anyway, not right. And certainly not a human right, and certainly not a right to shelter state, which is a term that we've somehow decided we have, and in practice, maybe not. So that's a big issue. I want to turn it over to you to introduce my guest here, because you have worked with us as a volunteer for Mass Coalition for Homeless. This is Kelly Turley, Advocacy Director for Mass Coalition, right? Is that the correct term?
Associate Director, yeah.
So please introduce Lynette Martin.
So thrilled to be able to introduce Lynette Martin. Lynette is a key member of our broader advocacy team at the Coalition for the Homeless. As Frank mentioned, we first met Lynette and her family when they were struggling to access shelter. And since then, we've been able to get to know Lynette as an advocate, as a mother, as a musician, as a healthcare provider, and as one of the most resilient people that I've come across. And we're grateful for your presence here today to talk about your journey and the path forward.
Amen.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. My journey started in 2016. We came back from Oklahoma. We thought that in Oklahoma would be something a little change up for our employment because there was nothing here. So we packed up and took off back to Oklahoma because that's where I was from. Lawton, Oklahoma, Fort Still. Military brat, basically. We were there for 6 months. Then we figured that it wasn't going to work out. We came here. We didn't have nowhere else to sleep except for in the hotel. We spent there for a week. Then, after the week was done, we went to DTA office to get our help. We didn't get our help. They told us we gotta stay in the car so we can get our help. Imagine you sleeping with having 2 dogs, 2 children who are in the spectrum, sleeping in the car in your mother-in-law's lawn in her house, in the cold of, believe it or not, today. This happened today. It was 20 degrees outside. Then that day morning, we went to my son's school, Dunning Elementary in Framingham, because that's our hometown. We basically went to the school that morning. The social worker actually helped us out, hooked us with an attorney in Boston, then connected to Metro West Legal Services. We went there, and the lawyer called up SMOC. SMOC picked up the phone, and they finally put us into a shelter that morning. My children were distraught. They didn't know what's going on. They were crying. Imagine having a child who is nonverbal, doesn't understand anything. He was petrified. I got 2 emotional support dogs. It was so cramped in that car. My Chevy Equinox. Thankfully, it managed to keep us warm, but to some degree. Now, right now we're living in an apartment right now in Marlboro, because we got out of there we left the shelter for 2 years. We were there for 2 years. We didn't get any services, quite frankly, because my husband and I, our plan was to work, save up, pay our debts, and get out of there, because that's only there for temporary. That wasn't going to be a long term. So we did that. That was our plan, to work our butts off. I was working maybe 3 jobs to work, and that caused me with a lot of great pain on my back, my legs. My husband worked, he worked at Watertown, so he drove from Framingham to Watertown every day with a beat up truck that he had at the time. Then 2018 came around, we finally got out, and we moved to Marlboro. We were so happy. Our rent was, for affordable housing, market rate, $1,394. Imagine, 2 jobs. Do you think that we're going to be able to cover that? We managed. Some strange reason we did it. And then now this year, we have 1,553. It went up. Now we got hit on the bump again. We lost both our jobs now. We were almost evicted. Thankfully, the church in Marlboro stepped up and paid our rent for now, for this month, but we don't know when, this next month of April, we don't know if we're gonna make it or not again. So right now, we're applying for unemployment. Thankfully, Rep. Glentel and his associates gonna help us to push them to get out of unemployment. And also, my husband's gonna try to get his SSI, which he himself is a special needs person. He has Asperger's syndrome, but doesn't stop him because he worked in the automotive technician for 6 years. That doesn't stop him. I myself, that's not gonna stop, because I myself a special needs person. But I also went a degree to do medical assisting. I'm very proud of it. Unfortunately, employment is scarce because no one wants to take us seriously because of our condition. I was working at Haywood Hospital in Gardner. I was discriminated because of my condition, and I left. They told me I need to leave because looks like they couldn't take my needs, and I mentioned about it. The boss didn't care. She said, forget it. So I went and I put a claim on that. And now I need to go to Worcester to finish up those paperwork, and I can't because I got no gas and I can't go anywhere. So now I'm stuck in my house with my kids. Luckily the kids have a place to go to school, have an afternoon program, but only for 3 days. And I have no sitters for those other 2 days, because I need to work full time and I can't. So I'm basically stuck right now. We don't know what's gonna happen for next month. Hopefully a miracle could happen, but we don't know what's gonna happen now. As a mother of 2 children, it really affects you and affects them. You don't understand how a child looks at the eyes of the world until you see them crying and complaining, saying, Mommy, what's gonna happen to me if we don't have a house? Mommy, what's gonna happen to me if I don't get clothes? Mommy, what's gonna happen if I can't eat? Those are the questions those kids ask you, and what's your answer gonna be? You don't know it. None of us does. And I went through that for 2 years. Here I am, and it's gonna happen again. And I'm not getting the help I need. I can't get Section 8. I'm still on the bottom list. I've been on the bottom list for almost 13 years. I've not been on top at all. I've been in the same spot, 2012. That's where I am right now. I got nothing. So now we're trying our friends. My husband and I are the only 2 left who are trying our hardest to reestablish our employment, trying to get the benefits, at least for now, until we can get it. So I'm asking every single senator out there to change the rules a little bit because of that, because I can't do this. I'm sick of it, I'm tired of it, I'm tired of being around the rosy. I'm tired of it. It has to do, we have to change something. If not, it's gonna be the same cycle. Every single family out there is gonna suffer, and you're not making it easy for them. Do something, because right now, nothing's working. And I'm proving it right now. Your system is failing, and I need help, we need help, especially children in my situation. Okay? So I thank you very much for inviting me here, I appreciate that. And Kelly, thank you for helping me the first time and the second time. I appreciate that. So, thank you all, I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Lynette. Thank you very, very much. I can't recall a more compelling statement than hers and our other two speakers here today. We've got a system here that isn't going to change in a hurry. And there's a lot that can be done in terms of legislation, and we will be mindful of that and advocate as we can. But the truth is, the separation between income and housing and expenses throughout is just something that's a market, and it's going to continue. The best that we bring to this issue is our compassion. And regardless of whether that is reaching out to your neighbor, or advocating, or serving food at the soup kitchen, or whatever it may be, we all have to get involved. This is a matter of brotherhood, human compassion, and taking care of one another. That is very foundation. Let me comment on just a few things that came from these excellent presentations. I spoke a bit about the affordable income. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. Let me just comment on the children, because truth is that's what really brings most of us to this. I mentioned the numbers. Over 9,000 reported from the Mass Department of Education. Homeless children in Massachusetts schools. Okay? And working the math on the 14,000 people in homeless families, 60% of which are kids. I mean, there it is again. We're talking about thousands of kids who want to be hidden. They're ashamed of this. And frankly, the general population doesn't get it. You know?
That's right.
So it's a sad thing that way. But let's look at this clinically for just a minute. If you have, and there are research organizations, Boston Foundation, etc., who have looked at homeless children and compared them to their counterparts in the school system across the country. And what they find is that, well, first of all, about half of them drop back one grade. They lose a grade in school. They can't perform in school as compared to their friends in school. A quarter of those would be affected. But most especially, the statistics on emotional damage, physical sickness as well, but these kids are scared, their spirit broken, and frankly, in the greater public place, they're being bullied, made fun of, and they feel terrible. I mean, we've heard this, and we know it's the truth. And it manifests itself in not only their physical health, but their emotional health too. The depression, the anxiety is huge. And then, can you spell drugs? And how about stress and physical harm to themselves? In a population like that, particularly from the standpoint of children who are brought up in an atmosphere of insecurity, no safe place to retreat at the end of the day and close the door. Fear and insecurity. This is what we can expect. And I would venture to say that if we start to make some progress to bring these children back in, give them some feeling of value, we may see the statistics on drug use change over the Who knows? But I mean, the point is, this is wrong. These are innocent participants in the family homelessness issue, and they are paying the price for it. Really, really has to change. So, where do I take this? I get a 10-minute, right, Charlie? I'm in a negative already. Okay. So I'll meet you in the parking lot. Okay. If I may just advocacy, because what we're here for is to try to encourage people to speak up. And there's a lot of traditional thinking about, well, yeah, we don't really do much good, and they don't hear us. But we're here to say, and this was brought on to us 15 years ago by the people who taught us to do this. These folks get it, and they're responsible to us for our opinions. And so it turns out that with your state senator and your state representative, you do get results. They'll speak in a second, and I think one of the questions I'll have is, how do you respond to this? What do we do? Assure us that when we call, when we send an email, that something's going to happen, you know, and you're going to point out legislation, and we're going to hope you're going to be on the right side of that stuff. So that, I'm probably forgetting some things, but that's kind of it. Again, I encourage you to please sign on to our list. So, with no further ado, we will ask June Cooper to step forward, please, and speak to us a little bit about ways we can pitch in too, right? Sure. June Cooper is the Executive Director of City Mission, a good associate of ours in advocacy and help to homeless families. June Cooper.
Well, thank you very much. Frank, we've been doing this for a long time. I didn't have any gray hair when I started, but now I do. Cover some of it up with...
Well, you're doing better than I am.
Cover some of it up, just so I can, just be out here. So, so there's a lot, but there's a lot to do, but really not. And I want to talk and have like 3 points, because I'm a minister, so I should have a 3-point sermon, right? That's my preaching for the day. So I want to just honor our tellers today, and it's a wonderful reminder of the fact that we all have a story, right? City Mission, we are just so fortunate to have a group called Public Voice, which are women who want to speak and share their story, receive professional training from a professional storyteller named Lanny Peterson, who we were just fortunate to get funding to open that project up. People receive like 6 weeks of training, and then we'll have a celebration at the end, and if you put your name on the list, I'd be glad to invite you to that. We have had now for the Lift Up program, we've done it for 10 years, we've had about 140 graduates, and we put the call out to those alums, And we were overwhelmed with the number of people who were interested in coming back to share and to learn and to get the gift of these skills, to be able to share their story. So it tells me that we're on to something, that as Frank said, or someone in our introduction, the power of story. And it's not to listen to a story to say, well, that's my story, but it is really to challenge you to think about, well, what is your story? Because we've got one. And if I had to share one today, I would just share the fact that I didn't realize it. Just in doing this work, I came to realize that in my senior year, I think my father was having this, what do they call it, midlife crisis? He's like trying to leave the ministry. Now, who try to do that? And so he was at a congregation down in Rhode Island, and he announces he's going to go work at industry up in Raytheon. And things didn't go well. We grew up in a church parsonage in Newport, Rhode Island. And so the congregation said, okay, you have a few months. And so my dad, he's got kids in college, he wants to buy a house, but no money. He's in ministry, making $34 a week. So finally, the word came that we had to get out of the parsonage and move to Boston without a penny. We looked at houses. I'll tell you how we got the money for the house, but when we went and knocked on doors with the realtor in Framingham, one or two people opened the door and saw our family there and said, the house has been sold. The house has been sold. This is in 1970. So that discrimination piece was clearly there. But there was a man that my mom worked for who said, you know what, I'll never want to see you and your family living under a bridge. And he was able to make funds available for my family to get a down payment for a house and gave us a loan of 1% interest, which my mom and dad paid back in about 5 years. So this work, it really is about opening our hearts, finding what our story is, and coming to community with compassion and with love. I don't know where we would be if it hadn't been for that person in my parents' lives. So, and talk about dignity and respect, and it was done in such a respectful way that it was good. The story today that I would share with you, I think many of you heard the story of the Good Samaritan. Raise your hand. Come on. Great Hebrew school. So this is a story of the Good Samaritan, and Jesus was always confronted by these people who had like these crazy questions. And so there was one of these wise people, he was a wise attorney, he goes up to Jesus, he says, well, what do I have to do to inherit the kingdom of God? And so the passage gets, Jesus says, well, he gives a story, he gives a parable, but he says you must love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. But the parable goes that, there was a man and he was on a road and he gets beat up. He's, some robbers come by and he falls into their hands. He's beaten, left for dead. A priest goes by and offers no assistance. A Levite goes by, keeps walking. Matter of fact, I think he went to the other side trying to pretend he didn't see it. And then a Samaritan comes along and puts this beat up man, throws him over his donkey, takes him into town, and takes him to an inn and gives the innkeeper money and says, you know what, I know that his managed care isn't going to pay for all of it. So he's going to need some money for his prescriptions and, some bandages and a few other things. And he might need first month's rent. So he might not be able to get back over the mountain to Jericho from where he was coming from. That Samaritan, and in the story we read, was not of the same racial or ethnic identity of the person that he helped. Reached out and took time and care to make a difference. But Dr. King had a different take on this story. And what he said was that we need to go up the Jericho road to find out what's going on. Like, why is it that people are getting beat up on that road? Why is it that people aren't able to access housing? Why is it that people aren't able to access good medical care? Why is it that our kids are having terrible educational experiences with all the resources that are around? So this story is one that calls us to not just look at some of these issues, I say, with a microscope. We need a telescope. We need a telescope to look at this stuff broadly. You talked about the children. When we talk about family homelessness, sometimes we talk about it, but we don't realize there are kids involved. There are children, there are young lives that are looking at all this and saying, oh my God, what is my future going to be like? Kids that are being really traumatized by this. So that is my point about, it's great and we have to have individual compassion, but we need a system of compassionate care. There is no safety net. I've been doing this work, ministry, well, I think I've been doing all of it all my life. But we used to talk about it in the 70s and 80s during the Reagan administration that the safety net was broken. Well, now there ain't no safety net. There is no safety net. There was a time when you could get on a list and get housing assistance. But now, with the privatization of everything, we're at the mercy of a market economy. And you know what that means? It's profit over people. This is not good. This is not good. So what we have on our hands is a moral situation. A moral situation. We have a humanitarian crisis, like when the bridge closed to Long Island, and all the folks that were living over there got traumatized just in a nanosecond of 2 hours when a decision was made without any thought about the people who had left that island to go to work and had nowhere to go back to. But we are right now facing a humanitarian crisis in terms of housing in Massachusetts. So the first thing we need to do is name it. When you're dealing with any kind of an addiction or a problem, the first part of it is to name it and to own it. But in some ways, we become so addicted to, distraction. But we need to name that we have a humanitarian problem, a housing problem about where people are going to live. And it begs the moral question. I've got 1 minute. It begs the moral question of what kind of world, what kind of community, what kind of neighborhood, what kind of street do we want to live on? Who's there? Is everybody there? Are there just those who can afford to be there are there? Maybe everyone who looks like us. I'm not a great advocate for being in a room where everybody looks alike. I love it. I'm generally the one who doesn't look like everybody. And I say that with some humor. I want to be in a room with people that look like me. Of course I want to be with my tribe. I get support and strength. But also, I invite others to be in those rooms where there's great diversity. Because you know what? In doing problem solving, the best answer comes from diverse groups, diverse people, diverse opinions, diverse ideas will always get us to a better solution. So that's the moral question that we have to ask. How do we want to live? Because it's not just about, it is about people having a place and a space. What they say is no place like home, and home is where the heart is. Well, that's a romantic notion. If you have nowhere to put your head, home is where the heart is. Okay, I get it spiritually. But if you don't have a concrete place to put your head, that is just romanticizing something. So here I'm going to leave you with these words that were left to me by my predecessor at City Mission. Her name was Valerie Russell, and she said this: there is a constant struggle against settling for what seems possible rather than striving towards what is demanded of us as people of faith. Thank you.
Thank you very much, June. And on the inclusivity front, I would make my own personal observation, being a 42-year resident of Acton, and frankly, this isn't directed to my neighbors, but there is also the flip side to the question of the likes, people who like us, who we feel comfortable with, and also listening to and being with all people. When you're locked in a room with all your likes, it is as good a source of ignorance as inclusive communities are a source of enlightenment and sharing. So, from my own personal viewpoint, I expect, and I do find that is the case. Well, Kelly Turley's been sitting down, she's very patient. She is another very good friend that the Advocacy Network. Oh, and before I get any further, I would like to ask a gentleman in the audience by the name of Carl Miller to stand up, because Carl is arguably our founder.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you very much. So anyway, I'm done blabbing. But Kelly, Mass Coalition for the Homeless, CHAPA, Homes and Families, these groups are really been so helpful. Absolutely. But most especially Kelly. She's been a good friend and a good mentor for us in our work. Would you please come forward and talk to us? What you see at the State House these days?
Thank you so much for having me here again. It's been an honor every year to be able to come back and to check in with this community, to stay in touch. And I know that the forum is just one day, but the work that you do spreads out throughout the year, and it's so critical. I know that you are represented well at the State House, but to have your elected officials know that this is something that you care about, that it's something that you take time out on a Sunday in the spring to talk about, it really means a lot. And for us at the Coalition doing statewide public policy work and also direct service work, to know that there are communities like this that are committed not just to addressing the current state of homelessness, but really envisioning a Massachusetts where everyone has a safe place to call home. And we know that there's a lot of steps before we get to that place. We've talked a bit about the numbers and statistics, and we know that none of the numbers and statistics really tell the story like we heard today from Maggie, Christine, and Lynette. Those numbers don't tell the story, but they also give us a sense of the scale. And oftentimes those numbers are manipulated. So the state will talk about, oh, there's 3,600 families in shelter, but they don't talk about all the families that are turned away when they show up to apply. You know, Lynette talked about being sent away until she came back and was able to prove that she had stayed in a place not meant for human habitation. According to the state's official numbers, 57% of families that applied for shelter between July and the end of December were approved. Not bad, more than half. But when pressed multiple times to produce the numbers of how many families actually inquire about shelter and start an application, what happens to those families who aren't allowed to complete an application? We were told repeatedly for at least about 4 years that those numbers don't exist. Some workers on the inside said, oh, well, maybe you'd like to see this report. So we had the name of a report, and we were able to file a Freedom of Information Act request. And we're still going through the 1,000 documents that came back from that request. But it looks like on average, any given day, 95% of the families across the state that show up and say, I'm experiencing homelessness, I need shelter, they're sent away. That night they do not receive shelter. 95%. This is in a so-called right to shelter state. So anytime anybody says it's a right to shelter state, it's kind of like that question around affordable housing. Like, who is the right for? Who is the housing affordable for? It's a very limited right. And we need to be able to push the state to be able to really honor that. And to be able to follow through on the basics. What we're asking for, we want to make sure that there are emergency services available for families, individuals, and youth when they need it. We want to make sure that there's a robust network of homelessness prevention resources so that people don't even have to get to the point where they're applying for shelter, spending hour after hour, day after day, reapplying, trying to get through to a worker to get access to those resources, and to make sure that housing is available at a scale where every person in Massachusetts can have a roof over their head and be able to afford it. And we know that we're nowhere near there. But with groups like this convening and the work that's being done, hopefully we'll get there soon. And just wanted to highlight a few pieces of legislation and a few budget line items that we're working on to hopefully move us in that direction. We've talked about families having to stay in places not meant for human habitation. That this is something that it's shameful that we have to come back and talk about this another year, that there is a policy in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that requires otherwise eligible families, in many cases, to prove that they've spent a night in an emergency room, in a car like Lynette talked about, in a laundromat, in a campground. This past year, there were over 600 families that only got into shelter after staying in a place not meant for human habitation. Between July and the end of December, another 283 families. Since this policy went into effect, over 3,600 families have stayed in unsafe places and then got shelter. Countless others never got the shelter. They were discouraged from completing their applications. This is wrong, and we called it out. We've pushed the governor, the previous governor, the current governor, the Department of Housing and Community Development to make these changes. And the pushback has been, it's going to cost too much money. Families are going to pretend that they don't have someplace else to go and bypass the system and access shelter. We've heard a little bit about what the family shelter system is like. It's not someplace that a family and children would go if they had someplace else safe to stay. And that's really calling them out on that is really important. We've been working with Representative Marjorie Decker of Cambridge. She's once again filed legislation for this session that would say that otherwise eligible families, meaning that they meet the income eligibility criteria, they have no place else to go, they have children, they haven't been in shelter in the last year, and on and on and on. Otherwise eligible families should be placed the same day that they apply for shelter, instead of having to come back. We know that for families that stay in cars, like Lynette's story, oftentimes they're asked, well, do you have a picture of you staying in your car? Did you talk to a social worker while you're in the car? What street did you park your car on? It's so undignified, the process of applying for shelter, and that this is the point where this is state policy, and it needs to change. So we're hopeful that this bill that was refiled by Rep. Decker will move forward this session. It's been assigned to the Joint Committee on Housing. We're hoping it will come up for a hearing soon. But we're also not waiting during this 2-year bill cycle for it to go through all the steps and just sit back. We're also working with Representative Decker, Senate President Karen Spilka, and others to be able to make this language change through the state budget process. We know that the state budget is a bill that has to pass. It may not pass on time, but it has to pass. And so the state Senate has included language that would change this policy for the past 3 years. And there's been pushback on the House. We know there have been some changes in House leadership, and we're some new people to try to educate on this issue, but we know that this is a simple language change that will be vital, not just to the 600 or 700 families that currently have been turned away each year, but to other families who will hopefully come forward and out of the shadows and push to have their application taken and get the services that they need. We know that once a family's in shelter, that they can access additional resources. They're often insufficient, but up to $10,000 to help with rehousing. In some cases, an extra priority on an affordable housing waiting list, connection to services that are needed. And if that front door is closed at the very beginning, we know the countless experiences of families with trauma, from the experience of homelessness and the outgrowths of it. So we're hopeful that this will be the year we can cross that policy out of the books and not have to come back next forum and say that it's an active campaign. But on the prevention side, we know that we don't even want families with children or other households to get to that point where they have to even think about sleeping in a car, campground, emergency room. And so we're working to increase resources for the state's homelessness prevention program, RAFT, Residential Assistance for Families in Transition. We're really grateful that the legislature has made a deep commitment in this program. This year it's funded at $20 million, the highest funding level ever. And as advocates, we say thank you, but we want more. And so this year, we're looking to redesign the program so that the resources are available more upstream, meaning not waiting until somebody is in housing court before we're able to provide funds for back rent. If we continue to wait till people are in housing court, countless tenants are gonna lose their housing. And so it's like, well, it's the same thing. We have to make sure that they're homeless enough or housing secure enough in order to turn over the resources. It doesn't make sense. And so we're working with over 100 groups around the state to reestablish a statewide rental arrearage program that would kick in when somebody's behind on the rent, but not necessarily having to wait till they have a court notice. And we're looking for an additional $7 million in the RAFT program to be able to pilot that more upstream model, as well as working to pass that language as a standalone bill, also filed by Representative Decker. We know that we need to have the homelessness prevention, we need to have access to those emergency services, but we also need to have housing that's affordable to the lowest income families and individuals. We've talked about it already today. The state does have a mechanism to provide that affordable housing, and one of those programs is the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program, MRVP. And the MRVP program this year is funded at $100 million, which is a lot of money. But back in the early 90s, it was funded at over $120 million. If you adjust that for inflation, we're far behind where we were. We've taken a step backwards in terms of investing in resources for the lowest income families and individuals. So we're working with groups around the state to be able to make deeper investments to bring that up to $130 million in the year ahead so that more households can get access to subsidies, that there can be more affordable housing for the lowest income families and individuals developed through that program, and to really make some necessary reforms. Senator Eldridge has been on the forefront to be able to improve the Mass Rental Voucher Program. And just something that's pretty shocking, that currently, without a waiver, if a tenant somehow gets to the top of the waiting list for this program, they can only rent housing that is at 2005 fair market rents or below. It's 2019, like why would we have anything set to a 2005 standard? We know that the housing market in this part of the state and statewide is not at 2005 market levels. So we're looking to make that language change, which means that the program's gonna have to adjust to reality. It's gonna cost more per subsidy, but if they can't be used, it's giving people false hope. You've waited 10 years to get to the top of this list, but well, you're gonna have to turn your subsidy back in because you can't use it. And so we're hopeful that this will be the year we can have these tough conversations at the State House and beyond, or what's really needed to begin to make some of these investments and to keep shining that light on this issue. It's not going to go away on its own, and it's going to take gatherings like this multiplied across the state to really echo the voices of families and individuals on the front lines, but all of us as a community will benefit when we make these deeper investments to really end homelessness and to be able to support housing that's safe, affordable, and accessible. So really grateful for your partnership. There's more information in the packet about the bills and budget items I mentioned, and also at the table in the back. I know you don't need to convince your own legislators, especially the ones that are here in the room, but there's some letters that you can sign to legislators that we will deliver at the State House. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. It was very, very good. Let me get into some of the general stuff. We're starting to speak about legislation now. And the two pieces of legislation that we want to lift up for you to consider are summarized in the sheets that we have in the brochure that you picked up, but also at our table here. And that is the legislation on unsafe places, which is HD 2406 according to this, and also the rental arrearage program. Christine spoke eloquently about the shock and trauma of having to go in someplace and apply for help only after she had gone to eviction court. We all bring certain skills to this world, but to ask everyone to suck it up and get in and deal with lawyers and the court system to prove that you are in fact in trouble. It's a little much. So the rental arrearage program gives the state the right to help with rental arrearage in a situation. It's pretty clear the person is going to be out on the street soon, but hasn't gone through the legal process. That is a big difference, and it'll make a lot of difference to RAFT. RAFT has been great because it's prevention funding, but having to appear in court is no joke. So those two pieces of legislation for sure. And we as well have a listing of the budget issues. We mentioned the 130 million for Mass Rental Voucher. We have a host of other things that are in the budget we'd like to draw your attention to. You guys, the two of you have been so patient sitting here. I don't know. I mean, Senator Eldridge is an old friend, and I mean, he just has been. But poor Patty, I mean, she is, I don't know. It's not easy. We put you on last, that's terrible. Anyway, we very much want to hear from you guys. And I wanted to ask Representative Tammy Gouveia if you will come and share your thoughts on these various issues.
This is really great, thank you, and thank you for sharing your stories. They really touched me, and I think you touched a lot of people here being really vulnerable and open with what your experiences were, and continue to be. And I really resonate with you in particular, Christine, because I too have a master's in social work, and I've been in the field of public health my whole career. So that some of the things that we've touched on, really the importance of going upstream. I also think that in addition to going upstream, we really need to be looking very, very broadly at the issues that families struggling with homelessness or at risk of homelessness are facing every single day. I think the highlight and the focus on children in particular is really, really critical. We know we're about 108,000 units short of the housing needs that we have in our state. And what that really means is that we drive competition, which drives prices up. So supply and demand are really ruling the day, rather than humanity. And I really like the focus on sort of the moral imperative that we have and the need to really focus on humane approaches to how we treat our fellow citizens in our state when it comes to struggles that they're facing every single day, that any of us could really end up in that situation, quite honestly. So I fully support, all of the pieces of legislation and the budget requests that the coalition has been advocating for. I first learned of all of the great work that you were doing last year. I call the bill where people have to stay in a car first, I call it the Cars and Kids bill. It's really unconscionable that we didn't pass it last year. There's a lot of game playing that happens up at the State House as to why that didn't pass. You have a really phenomenal champion in Representative Decker. So it's so great to know that she'll be putting in a budget amendment, and you definitely have my support in really pushing to make sure that we're really making sure that kids are not staying in cars in order to be able to prove that they need shelter. The other thing that's really important, I was glad, Frank, that I think it was you who touched on tipped workers, and the fact that 70% of those who are working in tipped wage jobs are women. And they're oftentimes facing sexual harassment and are putting up with behaviors from patrons just to make sure that they're paying that they're getting their paycheck and they're able to cover their expenses. So one of the things that some of us are doing is really pushing to make sure that we have a truly fair wage and that it covers tipped wage workers and that we're increasing that. So I'm not trying to steal the agenda of what you're really focused on, but as a public health social worker, I think it's really important that we're looking at other bills that really impact this issue that we face every single day. The other thing that's so important is MLAC, and Lynette, the program that you went through with Middlesex Legal Services, they're part of MLAC, and they've been asking for an increase. We know that we are not meeting the need that people have in terms of having an attorney at housing court. And so that's also contributing to this real problem of people not getting the shelter that they deserve and need, and not getting the services that they need and deserve. The other thing that we've been touching on here is we're talking about children in particular. Does that mean 7 minutes left? I didn't know. Okay, great. I don't need 7 more minutes. That's a long time. So the other thing that I think is really important is taking a look at adverse childhood experiences. And we know that when children and their families are experiencing financial struggles, experiencing feelings of insecurity, that it does contribute to their health and well-being, both in the short term, as you said, in terms of mental health and emotional health and their capacity to be able to learn, but also physical health long-term and down the line. We know that people who are from communities of color in particular and low-income communities have much higher rates of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, stress, suicide, alcoholism, and they all go right back to what was happening in that child's life as they were growing up, and all of the ways that we are not paying attention enough to the youngsters that are in our midst every single day. And I think it's so important that you highlighted the fact that young people who are struggling with homelessness or experiencing homelessness don't want to talk about it. And so we have 9,000 children who are walking through the day, probably falling through the cracks every single day, and their teachers aren't noticing what's going on because they're so busy and so strapped with everything else that they have going on with underfunded education. But also there are so many students who are just so quiet, just want to get through the day and try to get home, and they're not talking about it. And then they become teenagers and young adults, and then they start to really struggle, and they're the ones who are really falling through the cracks. So if we're not supporting programs now to make sure that people have a safe, humane, secure place to live and rest their head every night, we're paying for it somewhere else anyways, and it's just incredibly inhumane. So I did file a bill to look at the state of adverse childhood experiences in our state so that we can really get a handle on it and make sure that we're really starting to assess who are those youngsters who might need our help, who are just too quiet or too ashamed and don't feel treated humanely in order to be able to come forward. The other thing that's really important for us to look at is revenue. The reason why we have these problems and income inequality is because we have not been taxing the folks way at the top in corporations the way that we need to. We're supposed to be a civil society, which means we need to be making sure that people at the top are paying their fair share into the system that they benefit from every single day, so that all of us in our state can be able to thrive. So there is a tax on luxury homes that are not occupied, like the ones that were built in Boston around the seaport, that can also help create some additional revenue, but also say, you know, it's not okay that we have this luxury housing that's sitting there vacant that nobody's living in. We ought to be taxing that. So there are a number of us in the House that are going to start looking very carefully at opportunities for us to start to have the conversation about raising revenue. And I'm not talking $5 million here and $10 million there. I'm talking hundreds of millions of dollars that we need for education, transportation, housing, address climate change, all of the issues that we face that we're really struggling with that impact low-income communities and low-income people, income families, even more than our average population. I was taking notes while I was sitting, so I want to make sure that I'm covering all of my notes. I think the one last thing that I just want to sort of talk a little bit about is all of this comes down to who's really in power and who has influence and control. And I'm really glad to see all of you here. I'm glad to see that you'll be part of probably lobbying days and advocating. You are powerful. You have a lot of power in your voice and in your hands, and we need you to work collectively because the people at the top have tons of power, have tons of money, have tons of influence, and the only way that we can really start to dismantle that level of influence and power is by us all working together. So I look forward to partnering with you, working with you on this issue as well as a host of other issues that really intersect with the challenge that we face with our housing crisis, our humanitarian crisis, and the families that are really struggling with homelessness. So I thank you, the three of you again, for being here and for sharing your stories. Thank you.
Won't be long. Okay, I've lost my way.
It's this guy.
I need a show of hands from you folks as to, and I usually ask this first, but I forgot. Who of you have been to our forums in the past 15 years? Well, please raise your hands. Oh,
a lot of you.
well, that's good, but not as well. I know Carl has been, yeah, I know. But that's good. But it also says that there's a number of you that really ought to think about this. Advocacy works. It really, really does. There's a number of opportunities get involved. I'd like to point as well to our friends who are here with information tables. These are excellent organizations, all of whom help people get settled in housing and get to some of the problem. We have, of course, Habitat for Humanity. Carolyn Reed is here from Acton, and they talk about volunteer projects to bring new homes to people who need them. The very topic they're talking about. Cooperative Metropolitan Ministries, and thank you. Hi, I didn't see. We have the City Mission, of course, Mass Coalition. We have Boston Share, which is a very active operation linking our resources with needs in Boston. My friend Dot Wurst in the back, and we have someone here from Household Goods, where the goods are available, recycled and good usable material for people setting up their homes. Obviously a very important thing there. And who am I forgetting at the end there? Mass Coalition and us, we're down there, yeah. So Mass Coalition for sure. There's a lot of good literature there. Please go and chat with folks after the meeting. Okay, I think that's about all I gotta say there. I need to.
Am I not speaking? It's fine.
Oh, okay, no, okay, you can talk. Frank told me though. Thank you for being patient. I'm sorry, I go on. Anyway, our state representative.
All right, let's get into this. Good.
Good.
All right. Come here every year for 15 years. Okay, thank you.
Yes, you have.
So, thank you so much. And I'll be very brief, but I really appreciate everybody coming. Frank, thank you so much for organizing. I know in the past Carl has organized this. It's great to be here with you, Reverend Cooper. Kelly and I work very closely together at the State House. I see her like every week at the State House. And I hope you get, I know there's a lot of folks here from, of course, from Concord. I hope you realize what a tremendous, dynamic, terrific new state representative you have. Tammy really gets it from all angles and how people are connected. So, really enjoyed serving with her, and we were both we represent Acton together. So I would just say, I made a few quick notes, and it's interesting because just a week ago in a day, so last Saturday, had a really inspiring event in Acton, and I know Carolyn Reed is here from Habitat for Humanity. Is we celebrated 2 families moving into a duplex in Acton. So affordable, truly affordable housing for low-income families, and it was a really wonderful ceremony. And then this past, almost every day since then, there's been really sort of waking up to the realities of the housing crisis that we're in. Last Wednesday, there was an affordable housing forum in Waltham, which I think some people think of as, well, that's more of an affordable place to live for working families, but they're building luxury housing as well. And we've heard from a lot of stories from people that are getting priced out of Waltham, particularly immigrant families. This past Friday, there's an amazing nonprofit called One Family that helps mostly single mothers with support, mostly in the Boston area, but now it's out here in Marlborough, Framingham, providing them the support to get a college degree, get a job, and get out of poverty. And that was a very powerful event. But at the end of the lunch, a woman came up to me and said, I'm homeless, and it's interesting because I think people have different images of what being homeless is, and for her it was being doubled up in an apartment with her kids, in sort of an uninhabitable place to live in terms of really a decent place to provide for her kids. And one of the things that Representative David Linsky said, he's one of my colleagues who represents Natick, is if you're thinking about who the problem is, to quote Pogo, the problem is us, right? Because more often than not, it's the suburban communities that are stopping the multifamily housing, that are opposing, low-income housing, and we can't just ask, Boston or Lawrence or Cambridge, or Worcester to house people that are less well off. We all need to do our part. I think that Concord does a good job. I think Acton does a good job as far as suburban communities do, but a lot more of my communities, I represent 14, do not do a very good job. This morning I was in Maynard for a meeting, and a woman talked about her landlord raising the rent once again, and so in a way that she feels that the landlord is just trying to get people out of the entire building, maybe to redevelop it or turn it into condos or whatever. So it's happening in our area, and I want to thank the 3 individuals who spoke about what you went through, and really appreciate you telling your stories. What I would say, and I've said this I think for the past 4 or 5 years, is put aside the budget items that have been talked about, which I absolutely will advocate for, and I think you'll see some increases. It's really about the tougher discussion, quite honestly, in the suburbs about housing production, about zoning reform, about things like inclusionary zoning and providing more money, including at the town level, to build truly affordable housing. When Frank was speaking earlier about the problem that most affordable housing is out of reach for most working families or most low-income families, that doesn't have to be that way. If the town of Acton, the town of Concord, is willing to put up funding, whether it's CPA funding or whether it's own town money, so that when affordable housing is built, it's built for 50% of the median income or 30% of the median income, or something that I really do a lot of work with public housing authorities, is get your public housing authorities to build more public housing. And I'm a bit of a broken record on this, telling this story now, I think for 6 years straight, but the Acton Housing Authority, about 6 years ago, had some extra land, that the housing authority owned, not the town, and they built 12 units of public housing, and then they set aside 3 of those units for homeless families from Boston. So homeless families in Boston were placed in Acton, and that's not necessarily the ideal situation because you want to keep people where they grew up, but it provided a welcome relief for families who are living in shelter. So it's really, the state needs to do its part. There's a lot of bills that have been mentioned. I have filed a bill. It's called an Act to Create Affordable Housing in Every Community. Very, very subtly named bill. But it would provide $250 million to public housing authorities to build new housing. Because most of the state money that we pass is just for maintenance. It's not to build new housing. And another $250 million to build low-income housing. So in other words, not to build housing for people on the higher end of the spectrum of affordable, but for people that are truly low income. And it also has the real estate transfer tax that Tammy talked about. So you have a lot of high-end luxury housing. A fairly modest tax will literally raise hundreds of millions of dollars every year, and that can go to subsidized housing. Because if you're not providing a deeper subsidy, the reality is that the market does not work to build affordable housing. You need the role for the government, not only in terms of zoning reform, but also to provide deeper subsidies. And again, suburban communities need to do their part, and really they haven't, and that's something we all need to work on. So I just wanted to emphasize that. The budget is beginning, so we'll be advocating for MRVP and HVP. The bill that Kelly talked about and Lynette talked about to change the law about how someone can enter the shelter system. Kelly's absolutely right. That's because it's not that necessarily the DHCD wants to keep out homeless families. I mean, maybe some of them do, but I think it's mostly just it's a revenue issue, right? Is if there's not enough revenue coming into the state, to what Tammy talked about, then the different state bureaucracies have to find ways to save money. It's outrageous, but that's just the way it works until we can raise the revenue or build more shelters or build more affordable housing. And right now, there have to be people that live in train stations or live in cars or live in other facilities. So we have our work cut out for us, and I think there's a lot more advocacy this session on housing production. I haven't seen more advocacy at the State House in my 16 years as a legislator, so that gives me hope. But it's really where the rubber meets the road is the suburban communities who more often than not tend to oppose affordable housing. So we have our work cut out for us, and thanks for having me, and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. We have time for some Q&A. I just want to make just a one of my comments there. On the local front, yes, I think that ultimately, and Acton is a good one, that's my hometown. There is, I would just like to mention, maybe we can have a sidebar on this one. There is a place called the Concordian Motel
Oh, yes.
that has just been sold.
Yeah.
I am also a member of something called Homes for All in Acton, which is
Oh, yeah.
a chapter, you've been there, really.
Yeah.
My question to them was, we have the Concordian's been sold, and what I understand from what I've read is that they want to return it to a full motel type of operation. Come in, pay by the night, etc. What the present owner had done was allow residents in on a non-lease basis for reduced rents. And so they have had a population, in some cases some families that we've reached out to, who have been in there. And frankly, they've been $700 to $900 a month, which for some folks at the low income makes sense. Anyway, they're gonna renovate the place, okay, for the new owners. All right, so how are they gonna renovate? Well, they have to, of course, move some people around. So we came to find out they've raised the rent for all of these people. It's gone up to $250 a week. Now that's $1,100 a month, whatever. A big increase for these folks. So some of them, and we know some of them need to leave town. If they work in town, they have to go. If they go in school in town, they have to change school, whatever. But they gotta move, and they gotta find someplace else that they can afford, which is gonna be an uphill climb. The question I've brought to my friends, both at Town Hall and at this group, is what are we doing to help the 40 people, there's 40 of them, that may be displaced by this change. And frankly, all I get is criticism about the current owners and the bed bugs and the police are there and et cetera. And that all may be well and good, and the truth is, if we put that lens on a lot of these places, they would suffer from that. But anyway, it's kind of a good riddance to bad business thing. But be that as it may, what happens to these 40 people who are arguably in our community, employed there, and now have to change their lives? So, I mean, and I don't
So
know.
it's one less option for affordable housing in the area. That's what it is, Frank.
Yes,
Yeah.
it is.
And I will say though, it is not humane housing.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hot plates, it's not a full kitchen, there are refrigerators outside because there isn't a full refrigerator. So those folks did not have an occupancy permit for long-term leasing.
That's right.
So, and there's a lot of folks who really struggle with mental health and addiction. That's a lot of what the law enforcement calls are in regards to, are folks who are really struggling.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
so I hear you, and it's this tension of what do you do with folks who are going to be displaced, 40 folks, 40 families, and what are the lack of services ongoing in a way to have been supporting people while they've been living here, so.
yeah, that's
But it's a fair
true.
question, it's a fair question to ask.
Yeah, regardless of their health and all, they should be helped somehow. And all I understand that the town has done is given them individually, a list of shelters they can go to. They're referred to SMART, our brethren over in Framingham, and community teamwork out of town. Point is that a lot of folks are gonna get pushed out somehow.
Right.
And we should care enough
Exactly.
to sit down with them and try to put something together for them. Maybe there's nothing to be done, but ought to be something. So, and I would like to find a way to get that done. I've been encouraged to talk to the Attorney General and all this stuff. I'm not sure that's the case, and not much legal we can do, but could I have a brief chat with you guys after this is over? Just so if I'm missing something, I get that.
No, I've been.
Pardon? Yeah, Q&A. Thank you. Sorry. We've heard a lot of excellent talks here. Do you folks, ladies and gentlemen, do you have any questions for our speaker's going to ask a question?
I do.
I'm just speaking on what some of us touched on today on where children can go. Because you guys are kind of the people to ask for this, I can do my research when I leave as well, but I know the Sexton Young at Arts program is no longer. What options are there in Boston for children to go in the afternoons to get enrichment programs? Are there any of those now for arts? Or I know like Boys and Girls Club has some music. Do you know of anything that might have replaced the Sexton Young at Arts program? Or?
Not really,
No.
but there, if you see me afterwards, we'd be glad to hook you up. We have a social worker who knows about our Lift Up program. We make a lot of referrals, and so we certainly could help you and find something that might work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Before we get any further, and I'm just about to introduce my two friends from Belmont. This is one of the most active advocacy groups that we have in Metro West, is in Belmont, dealing with Watertown and Waltham. Gloria Leipzig and Jane, Judy, I'm sorry, do a wonderful job. Every year, a major event with their legislators as well, and doing some very active things on the housing front, reaching out to people with space and development opportunities. So, Belmont, thank you very much. And she has a question. Gloria has a question.
So I have a question, and for Senator Eldridge. I'm thrilled to hear about this bill that you've introduced. I'd actually like to get the numbers of it so that I can forward that on, because I'm very happy to hear about. Because as I was hearing the speakers, the issue about affordable housing really resonated with me. Belmont is developing some affordable housing, maybe some more at McLean's, but guess what? It's all going to be at 80% of area median income, which really isn't affordable. To afford a two-bedroom apartment, you have to make $65,000 a year, maybe 70 at this point, because that was a year ago, that number was floated around. We need, public housing is our biggest affordable housing resource.
Right.
And for a town like Belmont, all we have is state public housing. I'm happen to be a commissioner of the Belmont Housing Authority. And we have 3 administrative staff people. In terms of, we actually do have a large family development, probably sits on 7 acres. The housing was built in 1949.
Yeah.
It's horrible, it needs major modernization work. There's not enough money for major modernization. We have land that could be developed. We don't have the staff or the expertise to take advantage of any extra money that you're talking about, or if this bill would ever pass. DHCD, and I guess I'm not sure where to go with this, but we need to ask, we need help. We need that expertise to come in and say, oh, look at what you've got here in Belmont. You've got land. More could be built there. We need the subsidy to afford rents at 30% of your income. I volunteer at St. Francis House in downtown Boston. People come in with the Section 8 certificate like they've gotten the golden ticket. And guess what? You can't find an apartment with that Section 8 certificate. Public housing is an amazing resource, and we need to do more. So I'm thrilled to hear that you've introduced a bill that looks like it could expand the program. I'd be happy to talk to my legislators and others, talk about what you're advocating for, but I really think we need to sort of think about how this can be done, especially with small housing authorities throughout the Commonwealth, because there's a lot of land, I think, out there, and not the expertise to actually develop on it, or maybe the wherewithal from the state to build and support that housing. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good.
I'll just respond very quickly. So in addition to the bill having that money to build new public housing, it also has $10 million for technical assistance, because that, you're absolutely right, is a lot of smaller towns don't have the expertise to build public housing. And then the other issue, which Tammy and I need to work on, is that there is funding for DHCD so they can hire more staff, because that's the thing, is they've been another victim of the budget cuts over the past 15 years. So they could provide more support to Belmont or to other towns. So it really is, again, back to the lack of revenue, and therefore there's been all these layoffs and loss of expertise.
Do you have many people signing on to your bill?
Not yet, because it's a new bill, but you know, we're gathering support, and there is a lot more discussion around housing production, but a lot of different legislators have different ideas.
Any other questions? Gentlemen, back by the post. Yes, sir.
Hi. Hi. I think we have to be very practical in order to resolve this issue, because we have the crisis of corrections in real estate, where the market goes up and down. We're in a society that's, you know, free society, and the supply and demand is the basic law. So I think we might need to reconsider or look into it, smart growth, develop smart growth in the suburbs, where we can have commercial properties on the lower level, bring in the younger people too, you know, to stay there, to afford to stay in the suburbs, not to go to Boston, and at the same time, build public housing, and from the generating income coming into, to continue to support it. Because it's not only an issue of how to do it one time, but how we can maintain it in the long run. And we cannot always ask for hand every so often, you know, for more money and more money and more money. So I think we have to be self-sufficient. So.
Okay.
And I've been in real estate business for a long time, so.
Okay. No question with that, though, sir. Good point. Good point taken. Good. Any other questions? We've got time for one more.
So this is not to anyone specific, this is to everyone. If you are representing an agency or in any way associated or affiliated with an agency working on this problem that does not have a relationship with household goods, please come and see me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really quickly, any of you who are from Concord and Concord voters on our warrant, this April 9th will be the second night of town meeting. There are 4 articles on the warrant that will help you support affordable housing in Concord.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to comment really quickly to the gentleman who commented earlier is that, you know, I think it's just, one of the things that Governor Baker's mantra is if we build more housing, then some of it will be affordable, but that's just not how the housing market works. You have to have inclusionary zoning or the subsidies, otherwise, you know, no affordable housing will be built. You know, if 500 new homes were built in Acton, they would all sell for $600,000. They're not going to be, you know, $300,000. And to the woman who mentioned Concord Town Meeting, so Acton Town Meeting, for those who are here from Acton, I think we're voting on to allow detached in-law apartments on properties that would allow, you know, some more, you know, not necessarily subsidized, but, you know, hopefully more affordable apartments for properties. So I know that's a vote that's coming up. So.
Can I
Yes.
ask you a quick question? As a private homeowner, I'm possibly looking at renting out my house. Are there any incentives for people to rent at a lower level if it's a private apartment that's being rented? Is there anything like on state taxes or some other sort of incentive that could help people want to do that?
I think there have been some bills filed to create an incentive, and then you would have to create a deed restriction in order for it to count as affordable. But I think that there have been some bills filed as incentives. So, and thank you for considering that.
Any other questions?
Okay, well, if we're all set with our questions, I want to thank all of our speakers